It looks to me like from right here along this seam, like this, going along the frame right here up to probably this seam around here, probably all needs to come off. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Rebuild It. As you can see, we got the Solstice in the background here. Ben and I are getting ready to start working on it. And last episode, you saw we got quite a bit of progress made in getting this thing tore apart.
Real quick, guys, if you were having problems last week with the video freezing at 13 minutes and like 5 seconds or something, go back and rewatch it now. YouTube's fixed the freezing issue and it should be good to go now. Thanks.
So now we're to the part where we got to actually start getting the damaged fender off, the quarter panel off, and seeing what all's behind there and how bad a shape it is. So let's get started. We'll start by removing this plastic piece here that holds the rear bumper on so we can get to the spot welds on this bracket. And then we'll just drill all these spot welds out. When we get into here, get this door open. There we go. We'll have to remove this piece, and then we'll find a spot probably right in here somewhere and put a tape line across there and cut it, and then we'll just start heating up our seam, trying to get this to break loose. So, and then we'll see what we got back behind there, how bad it is behind it. Alright, so I've got all these spot welds drilled out. Everything's loose. And I had to really be careful to not drill through the second layer, because on the chunk, we didn't really care. We weren't trying to save what was behind here, but this time we're wanting a solid surface to weld through on the back side. So I was trying to make sure I only drilled through this top part that we're getting ready to throw away. So, and I didn't drill all the way through, so that was good. So now that's all done. I've got the slatch off, and so now we will make us a spot there and I'm going to put a blanket, one of those welding blankets over this seat interior stuff so we don't get any sparks. We'll make us a spot on there and go ahead and grind out right here where we want. I'm doing it this far this way, quite a way, so we'll have room to play with. I'm sure we'll end up splicing it somewhere in here when we put the new one on, but to get this one off, let's just splice it there and get it, or to cut it there and get it out of the way. All right, so this is where I ended up deciding to make my cut. It's just a flatter, straighter area there to cut, and I've still got on the chunk piece, it was cut back up in here somewhere, so I still got plenty of room to play with it once I get this off. So I'm gonna cut it right there. I've got some fireproof blanket covering all the interior parts. So we'll start grinding and cut that off, and then we'll start heating and trying to release that panel bond. If you remember, this quarter panel turns right here and goes down in a little crack there, and there's panel bond down in here. So since we're not trying to save the quarter panel, I'm going to go ahead and cut right here, and then once we get the quarter panel off, we'll be able to get heat back up in there and pull that other piece out. So I'm just going to cut this piece right there, and that should be all the cutting. Okay, so that piece is cut through. Now we have the whole back of this thing is pretty much free. So all we got left is heating this. Okay, I'd say that time that took probably 10 minutes because we knew exactly where to heat. So didn't get anything too hot. Now here's the part we've been waiting for to see how bad it is back here. So it is definitely hit hard. It's crinkled back in there. So we'll have to go outside and look at our chunk and see, and I'm glad I cut this back farther this way instead of back up here, because we have this seam right here, which that might end up having to come off because this piece right here is all connected in here and this is all just mangled. It looks to me like from right here along this seam like this, going along the frame right here up to probably this seam around here, probably all needs to come off and be replaced, which looks like a lot of work. We still have to heat this piece up here. We got to drill out this spot weld right here that was hidden, and then we'll heat this up and pull that out. All right guys, so it is the next day and I went ahead and pulled the chunk back into the shop here, and man, I'm glad we did not get rid of this thing, haul it to the scrap yet, because we need all of that, and it's in pristine condition from the chunk. So I went around and went ahead and I heated behind this just to see how easy this stuff was to get off, if it worked the same way as getting the quarter panel off. I heated back up behind here, so it got to 400 degrees or whatever, and this just popped off. It was a piece like this. So whatever we need to get off, as long as we can get to the back side, it's not going to be an issue to be able to get to all the spot welds that we need to drill out. I'm sure there's one underneath this, and there's probably one underneath this. We'll drill all these spot welds out, and then we have to grind all these welds right here that goes along the edge. And then we've got more spot welds, looks like, right here in this area. And then it makes a turn right here, so we don't have to go up and get into all this mess up here. We'll turn right here, and then we've got these right here. So this doesn't look super bad to get the one off the chunk. Now when you come over here to the coupe has a different configuration up here at the top than the convertible. This little piece here, which the downturned part of the quarter panel that we cut with the grinder across here, and on the convertible, that's just glued. There's just panel bond back behind this. Well, this is actually spot welded here to this piece right here. It looks like some kind of a gutter, which this is not on the convertible. So we're gonna have to drill these spot welds out here, heat this up, get this piece off, and then see what's involved and whether we want to remove all this, because I mean this piece right here is part of that, or whether we want to cut this here somehow and cut our chunk piece in the same way and butt weld this. I'd rather replace it, but I don't know what all is involved in this. We'll just have to see once we get that off. But for now, let's go ahead and start removing the one off of the chunk, and then we can get this big thing out of the shop. All right, so it came loose finally. I'd say that probably took maybe an hour and a half, something like that, to get that off. But holding on last was one of the spot welds wasn't completely drilled all the way through, so the sealant is not that much back there. So when I heated it up, it didn't take anything to let that loose. Here's the back side of this thing. Nobody's seen that since the factory. So we'll make sure we clean all that stuff up. Just make sure we got nice clean metal all the way around it before we put it on the other car, on the car. And doing that to this thing while it's not able to be flipped upside down and all that is going to be difficult. But now we know where every weld is and everything. So, all right, so like I said earlier, first thing on the car that we've got to do is to drill out these 4 spot welds right here, heat this up and get this piece of the quarter panel off, and then we'll see what's back behind there to see how we want to handle this area right here with the new structural piece that we got to put in there. All right, so that piece came off. I just drilled out those 4 spot welds and it just came off. So there was no panel bond behind that like there is on the convertible. So I think the best choice of action is to just go ahead and try to get all that off instead of cutting this and butt welding. So I'm gonna heat this thing. I don't see anything that looks like it's welded anywhere, so I'm just gonna try to heat it and get it to release and pull this out. Looks like it's just panel bonded in there to me. So let's try to heat it and let it get it to release. So yes, that was just panel bonded on. So once you learn the trick of this panel bond, you kind of learn how much you can heat it and not like burn the paint and just get it to release. So that piece went on there, heated it up, it slid up underneath that one like this. I'll get a good picture of that, make sure I remember that. And then spot weld it into this. So we've got our spot weld spot there to get it to, so we know exactly how it's going to line up. Now, we really need to be able to get behind this to heat that up enough to release this panel bond. I really didn't want to take off this bracket right here because I've got it marked exactly the way the hard top bolts to it, and exact so everything lines up right. I did not want to move that because, man, everything has to line up perfectly to get everything to not leak. So I'll trace around the outside edge, and there's 2 big bolts on the back side of it. I'll take it off and we can get there, just heat that up a little bit enough to release this and get to the spot welds. Okay, so got all that off, got the bracket and the seat belt piece off and all that, so I can get some heat back behind there. And that released, so now I can see all the spot welds. This one back here, I don't want to mess this up because that is the spacer. I mean, it's supposed to be panel bond, you know, but it's also a spacer that shows how thick this thing sticks out and all that, how high it goes and all that stuff. So I don't want to tear that up. So I think I'm going to drill this last spot weld out from this side, and then I'll weld it from inside on that last one. But the rest I can reach. So start drilling again, go all the way down, and then we'll get underneath and start doing the grinding again. But at least we know where everything is this time. me. I didn't think I was ever gonna get that thing off. Finally got it. I had everything loose. It was like caught in this right here. So that had smashed that top piece back up in behind there, and it would not let go. So I'll have to see if this new one is even lined up with that. If not, I'll have to do some beating around on that thing to get it to line up with the holes. But anyway, the frame and everything else looks unharmed. All right, it's the next day and I've recovered from bending over and grinding for like 5 hours straight. So here's my two pieces. This one out here on the front came off the chunk, of course, but it's not destroyed. And this one in the back, this destroyed one. And they look to me identical in every way except for at the very top. So you can see the the coupe one has got a longer cut here. They had another weld on the convertible one right here. So I'm gonna need to cut this in here and match that right there so it fits in there correctly. Grind all these little rough spots down and along here, you know, just clean all that up so where it's ready to weld. And then we'll go in here and grind again all these areas where it's got the spots left, you know, from where we took the other one off. We'll grind all that down smooth and then spray weld through primer on that, and then start trying to, and then clean all these. We'll have to grind all these spot weld spots out, and all along here. And then we'll start dry fitting it and see what's involved in trying to get this to match up right up here and here where it was damaged. Make sure all these holes line up. All right, so the more that I look at the top of these two pieces and measure them, the more I see there's a little bit of a difference. Because on this one, we've got a little shelf right here. So when these were stamped out, this was stamped specifically for a coupe. They just slap the top on there. So this little shelf right here is on that one. On this one, it's just smooth. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is go ahead and cut across here, cut a line across here, cut this top of this piece off, and come over here and see how well it lines up with this one, put it over the top of that, and hopefully cut this one and butt weld that on there and then grind it down smooth. Because I just don't want any leaks and stuff up here. Once we put this on, it all has to match like the other one did. And this one is not going to be the same. So it is everywhere else that I can see. But let's go ahead and cut that off and then see what it looks like. Alright, so I got these pieces cut off of both things. As you can see, they match up, except one on the convertible is a little bit longer from the bend here to the end, which is from here to here. And I think if I match up this bend, that's the main thing. So this is the one from the coupe. I put it on the convertible one. And it looks like it matched up really good, and then it is a little bit short right there, but I don't think that should affect anything over there. As long as this matches up here, then we'll just grind that down to match it over there. So I'll go ahead and grind down, get all this paint off of here so we get a good way to weld, and grind down the sharp edges so that we got a good flat spot, and let's get it welded on there. All right, so what I did was I went over here and put this piece from the original and clamped it back up here where all the holes line up. And then I'm going to get this new bottom piece where it's all lined up everywhere. And then make sure these two right here lined up, and I'll mark it, and then I'll recut, you know, for everything to match exactly. So this thing is not wanting to go in there all the way, because I think this area back here where they had the 4 bolts going into that one brace that was bent, I think it's messing with it. So I'm gonna get back in there and tap it around and try to get it to line up. All right, so you can see I'm starting to get it pretty close. These little flanges that we saw before, you can see that top one is kind of back in their ways. It needs to be bent back forward a little bit, I guess, direct smash it that direction. And this one over here, the hole is way back up in there. So that flange needs to move out too. Everything else is pretty close. Once I get those in, I can put the bolts in there and pull it in to where I can get a good contact to weld, and then that'll pull this into and close up some of these gaps, and we'll trim around that little edge there, get our gap where it needs to be, and then we can weld that together. All right, so we have alignment. Got all the bolt holes lined up inside the cabin in there and outside here. I put some screws in there to pull up the that backing plate, enough for me to weld. And I've got to cut this white, where that white line is on this piece from the original top, and then I'll trim that out a little bit more right there to so I have a better crack to weld through. And that should let this go in another 1/16, and then that should line right up. So it looks like it's really good. And I've already got the weld through primer painted on the frame down there, and that's all ready to weld down there. So, and this edge lined up really good here. So everything's ready. All right, so the final fit, got that all cut, and that gap right there is a little bit wider than I like to weld, but it'll be all right. I mean, it's really lined up good as far as in and out and the angle and stuff. So I'm gonna start welding. Well, there it is, all welded in. And I'm not the greatest welder in the world, but don't make fun of my big giant blobs. Look like a dirt dauber came in here and built a nest, but it's welded. So, and it's where it needs to be. That'll be it for today. Next step will be trying to figure out, make sure our panel fits on there correctly, and figure out what all has to go back on here. I know we have to spot weld that piece right here. It has to be welded on the quarter panel, the back side of it. That's the way it was. We got to do that before we put it on, because we won't be able to reach underneath there after we get it on there. So we'll grind all these welds down and get everything smooth, and start on the quarter panel. Well, that's all the time we got for today, guys. I appreciate you tuning in and watching this episode of Rebuild It. Hopefully next week we'll get to see some major progress and get this side over there finished. Like, I'd like to have the quarter panel reinstalled next week and that door replaced, which means tearing it all apart. And I'm not sure how we got to get the wiring out. I can't remember from the last time we did it, but it should be interesting. So if you enjoyed this one, give us a thumbs up. We really appreciate your support for watching and everything. And make sure you share us with your friends, and please be a subscriber. That really helps out our channel. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
And always remember, don't retire it if you can rebuild it. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in and watching this week's episode of Rebuild It. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any awesome content. Have a good one.